So it's Thursday the 19th of September and we're in Tewkesbury for a day at a haunted pub crawl. But first we're going to go into the John Moore Museum, which comprises the Naturalists Museum itself and a merchant's house and the Old Baptist Chapel. The admission fee is £6 for the 3 museums, or you can just do 1 or 2 depending on how long you've got to have a look round. And the museum and the merchant's house date to around 1410, so you're talking early 15th century. The timbers from those properties were dendronologically dated to 1405 to 1408, which means that the properties were probably built at the latest around 1410, and they were part of the Abbey estate. So let's go and have a look round. Merchant's House by Jeremy Benson, which we're going to see in a bit. Today we can see the Merchant's House and this museum, and this ground floor has a lot of information on John Moore, who wrote over 40 books, and there's some down here, second-hand books that you can buy as well. So he was born near Tewkesbury in 1907 in Uplands.
Yes, please.
Wonderful. We have 2 sites available today. We have this, which is the John Moore Museum, which has...
His father was an auctioneer, and then he moved into the Tudor house in Tewkesbury's High Street. Oh, how sad, his father died in 1918. So he was only like 11 years old when his father died. Oh, how sad. These are some of the books down here.
They'll say hello and
English comedy, that might be fun. Look at that
so you know
one.
exactly how they work. How they can be quite temperamental at times, which is why I always say.
£6.99.
Wonderful.
Might get that later. English comedy. This is
So,
all the stuff you can
Merch.
buy. Merch, stones, and lovely cards foxes.
In this area, Tewkesbury, Gloucestershire.
Quite a lot here about the peregrine falcons as well. We've seen peregrines, haven't we?
Yeah.
Yes, he died when he was only 60 years old, but he wrote 40 books. The last book he wrote was published in 1965, and he called Tewkesbury Elmbury in his books as well, and they were based on probably the life of the town.
How's it going, Martin?
Let's go.
Martin is putting together experiments for a school trip tomorrow. It's
Oh,
about
lovely.
geology and the
Oh,
ground
how
and
lovely!
flooding.
Yeah.
Oh, excellent.
It's lovely, isn't it? It's just going over now, so it's not as nice as it was, but still really cool. This whole row of cottages were built in 1410 by the Benedictine monks at the Abbey as a source of revenue for the Abbey. There were 25 of them originally. We have lost a couple, and some of them have like to have been knocked into one, so I think there's 14 now. Although they were built in 1410, we've had this cottage restored to the period of about 1580 as a Tudor merchant's house. Everyone loves the Tudors. And this huge pitched roof you see on it here would have run the width of all 25 cottages. It would have been quite spectacular, I think. And all these extra windows and bits and bobs started to go on from about the Georgian area. They started to sort of renovate them a bit, add bedrooms and chimneys and all sorts of things. So our cottages here, we've got these lovely little gardens now, but they would have actually been all open. It would have looked a bit more like an allotment. Everyone having a long stretch going right back to the Abbey. That's a newish wall, 1970. It would have looked very different. So let's go in and have a look at the inside. A bit dark with this scaffolding. So as we go in, mind your head, the lintel's very low and there's a big threshold. Some people stand on that and push themselves up and you're like, that's not a good way. Come in and take a seat. So, we're in a medieval property. Now, lots of medieval properties only lasted 20 to 30 years because the timbers rotted and they fell down. But thankfully, the Benedictine monks had them built with a foundation of stone all the way along this length of cottages, which is quite impressive. Perhaps because Tewkesbury flooded then, we know it flooded in 1454, I think it was, so perhaps that's why they did it. However, this room is about 50 years younger than the original building. It's something the merchant might have had built himself and not paid rent for a year because he needed the space. And it's basically a workshop, it's extra space. You know, he could keep his tools out here, they can keep food in this cold safe, it's up off the floor, keep everything. He's got his pilgrim stick here. There was no police force. If there was a burglar in town or anything, everyone went out with their pilgrim sticks, gave them a good bashing, maybe killed them. Talking of burglars, actually, when you had a burglar, they didn't try and break down your solid oak door. They just kicked their way through the wall because originally the walls, I mean, we've got concrete now, but they were wattle and daub, which is just sticks and, you know, daubed up with mud and blood and poo. And that's where we get the phrase, someone's breaking in from that. So, the other thing is, people always say Tudor people must have been very small, look at the doorway. But they weren't, there were lots of tall Tudor people, but that is a door to the outside world, and we don't have central heating in here. You're not going to have a hulking great arching doorway, you want to keep it warm. We've got a very high threshold, and it's called a threshold because there would have been rushes on the floor, and it's literally holding the thresh inside the room. The floor would have been pressed soil, and it would have been sprinkled with a herb called tansy, because worms don't like it, so they won't come up and break all the soil up and come into the room. And then you'd use other herbs on the rushes like marjoram and lavender. They smell nice. They're going to protect you from miasmas, which are the poisons in the air. That's what they believed. And then things like wormwood and rue, which repel moths and fleas. I was thinking about these things all the time. We don't have glass windows in here. We have our linen cloths that are soaked in linseed oil. They are actually effective against the weather. Now, some of the volunteers have redone them recently and they haven't got them very tight. The ones we had before, it was like knocking on a drum, so you know it takes a bit of practice. But once the shutters are closed, it's really cosy and warm. So, we are going to go through to the Great Hall. Follow me, mind your step. This is the living room, dining room, kitchen. This is all they had. They've got the fire in the middle of the room, and the smoke would have gone straight up into the smoke void and be pushed out to the cracks in the roof. Now that soot damage up there is actually from the original, when it was originally built and the fire was being used. It's one of the reasons they chose this cottage for the museum, which I think is pretty amazing. And although the smoke would have been going out through cracks in the roof, you'd have still had a smoke horizon, there's no doubt about it, so it would have been quite unpleasant. They're also using tallow candles, which are made from animal fat. They gave off black smoke and smelled like burnt bacon. If you had a bit more money, you could use beeswax candles. Now the clergy only use beeswax candles because they don't smell, they don't give off black smoke that will damage the walls, and beeswax is made by worker bees who don't mate with the queen, so the candles are more pure.
I'll make beeswax candles.
Oh, do you? Not in the clergy, are you?
No.
Oh no, that's all right.
Not yet.
Oh, yeah, okay,
maybe in another lifetime.
So, we've got an open fire here. We're in a wooden house, you know, all the bottle and daub's wooden, the beams. We've got rushes all over the floor. I mean, what could go wrong? So we've got our little Tudor watering can that we use to sprinkle water around the fire just to keep the rushes damp. And then when we go to bed at night, we use our curfew. It sits over the fire, has the air vents, and the fire can't jump out. And hopefully there'll be enough embers in the morning that you just need to use the bellows to start the fire. Because the last thing you want to have to do is use your flint and steel. Some volunteers show you how it in operation, but I can never get a spark, so I won't bother. Now the curfew actually dates back to William the Conqueror, when it meant the same as it means today. It was a way of stopping people going out in the evening and having secret meetings trying to start a rebellion. But the word curfew comes from the French couvre-feu, which means cover fire. Well, a rebellion could be seen as a fire that's going to spread, and William the Conqueror was French. Just an interesting bit there. Now, let's have a look at food. People in this house would have actually eaten quite healthily. Now, everyone, no matter what your social standing, had a staple diet of bread, meat and cheese. We'd have also had, we've got that lovely garden, seasonal vegetables, herbs, fruit trees. We might have a pig at the end who'd be slaughtered in the autumn. Should I stop? I do that every time. Do you think I should stop doing that? Slaughtered in the autumn and hung and smoked so you've got food for the winter. And also, twice a week it was the law to eat fish. Now the Tudor definition of fish was slightly different. It meant anything that lived by the water. So on a fish day, you could eat otter, beaver, frog, duck, whatever. So it wasn't really that restrictive. And people would always eat pottage, which is like a stew. It's got pulses and beans in and a few vegetables, really yummy, and that would have been cooking on here all day. Now, that's quite a healthy diet. The royal family were eating 80% protein, 20 grams of salt a day, and all of their food was covered in sugar. Now, not this horrible brown stuff. They had the really fine, expensive white stuff scraped onto their meat, their salads, in their soup, really gross. And these cones actually came in much bigger sugar loaves, were coming from places like Persia and Madeira via Antwerp, and they were being processed every time they stopped somewhere. Probably wouldn't have had it here. And that's why lots of rich people had really rotten teeth. Elizabeth I had the worst pongy breath ever and hideous black teeth. And people lower down the social scale would get soot and rub it into their teeth so that people thought they had money. It's really ridiculous. The opposite of today. You've got brown teeth today, you're poor. I'll keep my mouth very closed. When they ate their meals, they ate on a trencher, usually wooden ones made out of a hardwood like sycamore so the food doesn't soak in. We've got a little pinch for salt there. And the food would be laid out like what we would call a buffet. But in Tudor times, a buffet was the cabinet that you stored all your plates on. Especially if you were rich, you'd have a really nice buffet with all your fancy plates and things up there. Now, Tudor people didn't really eat with forks. Forks were mainly used for serving food out, and they often drank the liquids out of their bowls or cups or whatever, but they could use a spoon for scooping liquid and a knife for cutting. I'll just show you this spoon because I think it's interesting. It's a seal top spoon, and when you're finished eating, you go off and write a letter, dip it in some wax, and it's got a Tudor rose on the top, so it's a letter seal. Because everyone wants to have their spoon with them while they're writing a letter, you know? But you know, you never know. And if you went to somebody else's house, you always took your cutlery with you in your top pocket or your purse, because most people didn't have spare cutlery. There used to be bread trenchers, you know, before the wooden ones came in, crusts of bread, and then when they'd finished eating, they'd stack all the crusts outside with all the meat juices and gravy soaked in for the poor people, and I think, oh, it sounds so delicious. And pies, there's a big pie here, apparently they only ate the inside of the pie and left, the pastry's the best bit, but apparently they used to bake it really hard and use it like a cooking pot, like a baking pot somewhere else. So, we have got some cinnamon in this house, which is probably not quite unlikely, because cinnamon costs about 3 times the amount of beef, so a house like this probably wouldn't have it. And actually, when spices started coming into England, used by apothecaries for making medicine rather than in cooking. And I've lined this up perfectly, talking of medicine. We've got the still here. You put fire in the bottom, ingredients in the top, and you can create your own medicines. Every household woman, and even her daughters, would learn hedgerow medicine, using things from the garden to create their own cures. Because nobody wants to spend the money to go and see a medical professional, apart from the fact that they had a deep mistrust of them. Some of the treatments were pretty brutal. However, some of their own treatments are weird, and I think, who came up with that idea? So if you had a headache, you could cut off a bit of your hair, boil it in some of your own urine and cast it into the fire, headache gone. And then if you had the plague and you had buboes, now okay, they didn't have so much plague in Tudor times, I know, but if you had buboes, you get a live chicken, pluck its bum and put its bare bum onto the bubo and hold it there till the chicken died. Who came up with that? Who thinks let's put a chicken's bum on a bubo? Of course they didn't know about bacteria until 1861, so perhaps they didn't really think it through, I don't think. So you can see that this is quite an intimate space. You can try and imagine what life would have been like, particularly if you had a few children. It would have been a bit cramped and hard work all the time, getting firewood, getting ingredients for the cooking, constantly tending the fire. I mean, Tudor people would get up during the night to pray and to tend the fire. So, any questions before we move on? So I should probably explain that these houses are not almshouses, although they are charitable. So when they were built, the monks built them to make money. But the idea is to help people out. So we might have a merchant who can't afford to rent a shop in town, but here he's got a house and a shop. He can build his business up, build his reputation, and then move on somewhere to a bigger premises. And these have continued to be charitable houses. They're charitable now, run by a charity, the Abbey Lawn Trust. And the idea was back then that at the end of the year, all the rent that had been collected was used to do any maintenance and repairs, and whatever was left was taken to the church and handed out to the poor. So they were charitable in that way. Now, we don't know what sort of merchant was here, but we've gone for a cloth merchant. Everyone needed materials to make clothes, so we've gone for cloth. Woolen stockings are getting very popular, very fashionable now as well, so we may have had a woolen stocking hanging up outside for the people who couldn't read, so that they knew what he was selling. Now, the shutters would have dropped down into the street. They would have folded here so that this bit became the leg, and he'd have served people at the window. And it must have been quite a bustling street, because there were 25 cottages and every single one has one of these shops, or had one of these shops. It would have been really busy high street. Before we move on up to upstairs, I've just got to show you something because I love it. A medieval candlestick. I'm going to find a blacksmith to make me some of these. Look how stylish. It's got a hook on the back. You can hang it on the wall, put your candle in there. It's got a spike at the bottom. I keep saying in the bottom. And you can put it in the ground and do that. How useful is that? I think it's absolutely fantastic. So there we are. So our merchant would have been working here on his own. Now, 1580, a few more people were learning to read and write now. His wife may have been able to read and write so she could help in the shop, or he may have had an apprentice that he felt comfortable leaving in the shop if he had to go off anywhere. And just a little side note, all apprentices, regardless of your age or what you were apprenticed to, what trade, they all wore blue. If you saw someone wearing blue, you knew that they were an apprentice of some sort. So, we're going to go, don't worry, you can have a look around after I've finished. I'm going to go upstairs now, serious health and safety issue. I am following health and safety.
Tell me about the ghost, I want to know about the haunting.
Well, his name is John Bartlett, and he's an old rent collector that sometimes wanders up and down this alleyway hoping to find someone who hasn't paid their rent. I haven't seen him yet. I've been here 5 years, but it's pretty creepy. And at night, in the winter, imagine it in the winter and it's already dark outside, we have to close the shutters in the workshop, close the shutter upstairs, and some idiot put the electric lights this end. I can get up there like a greyhound, hurtling over the beams. Oh, it's really creepy. And actually, last year I said, can we do a Halloween event? I'd love to do it, because I do quite a lot in the museum. And we came up with an idea. We had got candles all over the place. I bought a deer's heart from the butcher. I had to wash it out in the sink. I had to go down all the tubes and the aorta and valves, getting the blood clots out so it was clean. Stuck it all with nails, and I had it on a tray, and oh, it was absolutely brilliant. Doing it again this year. It's going to be a bit more organised. I sort of went all witchy, and it just was chaos, but it was really creepy. Anyway, we're going to go upstairs next. We've got to be careful, that's it. We're going through a doorway. The taller people, mind your head. The stairs are steep and narrow. The top 6 stairs are original. They're amazing. I love them. And I always say this, try and imagine, and it will be harder for the men, I think. Try and imagine wearing a long Tudor dress, carrying a candle and a baby, because there wouldn't have been handrails and electric lights. We'll go up.
Original steps.
And only a bedroom, and weren't the stairs fab? And I sometimes dress as a Tudor lady. Once a month I do costume tours, and I've become Agnes Hughes. And I can come up those stairs. I have to have the dress hoiked up to about here, because you just stand on the front, you can't walk, it's terrible. So, we've got 1 bedroom for our whole family. Now, the adults would have had the nice cosy bed, because they're doing most of the work. They've got a canopy on the bed, because there's no ceiling, and all the bits would be dropping off the beams and everything. They've got the curtains, they're going to keep them warm, keep out rats and mice, protect them from the miasmas. You did all know what miasmas were, didn't you? From the Hippocrates miasma theory. It's going to protect you from that a bit, and it's going to give you a bit of privacy, you know, because you've got children all on the floor, so excuse me kids, we need a bit of private time. I mean, how they ever had children when it's just curtains that, you know, separating them. They would have had herbs on the bed, stuffed in the mattress, again protecting them. The bed has a straw bottom. That does go slack and it has to be tightened regularly, and that's why we say sleep tight. And maybe don't let the bed bugs bite. Children would have slept on this trundle bed, or truckle bed. It was sometimes called a truckle bed because the wheels are called trucks. Again, it's string, but they've only got a mattress stuffed with straw. You're not going to spend a lot of money on a child's bed. You don't know how long they're going to survive. We often have children come in here and say, oh, wouldn't it have been a bit tight under there? I don't sleep under there, this is where they store the bed. So you could have several of those mattresses on the floor. If you had a lot of children, you might have had some downstairs around the fire. You will have noticed there is no bathroom in this house, but there is an ensuite. So we've got our bowl for water. Tudor people washed every morning and night. They washed their hands because they ate with their hands a lot. You don't want dirty hands. They'd wash their face and their feet, but that's about it. They didn't use hot water because it opens your pores and it can let evil spirits or miasmas in. So they might have only had a bath once a year. But they kept their clothes clean. The woolen clothing was hardly ever washed because you can't get it dry. But the ladies that had like cotton chemises, a few of those, they can be rinsed out easily. They used to dab perfume on their clothes because if you smell bad, people might think that you're carrying disease. So it's really important. So, if you need the toilet in the middle of the night, it's pitch black, you use your piss pot. We have a his and hers there. I'm not going to tell you whose is whose. So you'd use that, and then in the morning you would... What would you do in the morning? Everyone always says the same thing.
Throw it out the window.
No, mother. No, not in this house anyway. Because we've got our lovely cloths all pinned down. We've got our front door and our shop below us. And actually, that's got a lot of uses. We can sell the urine to the tanneries and use it for making leather soft or dyeing cloth. Ladies' urine is more alkaline, so it can be used for fulling, which is getting the oil out of wool, and it's also very good for washing white linens, getting the oil and dirt out. Men's urine contains something called saltpeter, which can be used for making gunpowder. So, you know, you could sell it on or you could use it in the house. Some wives made mouthwash with it. I haven't tried that yet, although I might have to soon. My mouth's getting very dry. I should just quickly say it did get chucked out the window in certain places. A lot of the towns were being overwhelmed and the infrastructure just wasn't there for it, so people would just chuck it out. Or the big tenement buildings in poor areas, they might chuck it out because they might not be able to afford the cloth at the window, and if they were really poor they wouldn't even have a pot to piss in. So for the rest of the time you would go down to the end of the garden and use the jakes, basically an outside toilet, little shed, cesspit in the ground with a seat on it, and every 2 or 3 weeks the gong farmers would come along. Gong is another word for poo, and they'd usually have a apprentice with them who would have to go into all the cesspits and shovel them all out, and it got taken away to be used as fertiliser on the fields. Now they had rogue gong farmers, some of them couldn't be bothered to do their job and they dumped it in the river, just like today. But if you were caught doing that, one of the punishments was to be put into a cesspit up to your neck, and that's why we say you're up to your neck in it. I love all these little phrases where they come from, so cool. It was rubbed in butter or rose oil to protect its skin. They were kept swaddled till they were about 10 months old. So they could be taken downstairs and hung on a hook or a peg, because you can't put a baby on the floor, you know, it's just not safe. And then when they're about 10 months old, you could stand them up against the furniture. Basically the crawling phase. Again, you've got an open fire, mice and bugs. Think, you know, how did that affect their physicality? In coordination, your joints are growing, that's got to have some effect. And they also did it so that they would grow up tall and straight. But if a baby bends its leg just as you're starting to swaddle it, you know, some people had deformities or, you know, problems because they hadn't been swaddled straight. Just talking to babies, I often think about statistics too. Everyone says Tudor people didn't live as long as us. There are loads of records of old Tudor people. Henry VIII was a giant slob. He makes me look like Twiggy. Huge man, his legs were rotting underneath him. You could smell him half a mile away. Still lived to be about 57, so come on. New baby. She came from the Bartholomew Fair in London, which was predominantly a cloth fair that ran from 1133 to 1855. And someone like our merchant would have gone there to buy stock for his shop. And the wholesalers would have these dollies on the front of their stalls, and it's a bit like a swatch book. It's got different materials on. He could say, oh, I'll have 4 rolls of that please, and 4 rolls of that. It must have been quite nice to see them all along the fronts of the stalls, but this one's come home for the children. However, our merchant probably didn't go to the Bartholomew Fair because it's too far. He'd have to take a few days away from the shop, cost a lot of money, so he'd probably be going to the fairs at Gloucester.
Now, these houses were built in 1410 by the Benedictine monks for, obviously, you know, business and property interests. And then when the abbey was dissolved, its account showed that it was receiving rents from 25 tenements, standing in Church Street from the cemetery to Gander Lane, which lies east of the abbey. Here you can see some pictures. They're all being restored again at the moment as well. That's what it looked like.
The actual restoration when they stripped it right down to the beams.
Yeah, between 67 and 73, so it took 6 years. But there's some more work going on now. But that's it with old buildings, you've got to keep up with work. There's always something that needs doing. This room has lots of different tools used in hedging and thatching. It's interesting to see how many different tools they actually had. A thatch roof needs to be replaced every 25 years.
It's because the straw can deteriorate and you get mice and rats living in them,
And there can be a fire hazard as well.
oh yes.
You have to have special insurance if you buy a thatched cottage, for example.
It's probably very expensive.
Yeah, it's an indemnity insurance.
The thatcher's tools.
Slashers.
Mmm.
Gosh. I wonder how they managed to wield those, because they look pretty heavy. I wouldn't be able to lift one and use it. They must be very strong, you know.
Probably very fit, yes.
You'd need to be, wouldn't you? And these ditching tools. A spade for clay. Trenching forks. Foot pick. Would really help you get under the undergrowth, and a drainage spade as well.
Oh, yeah.
And then these are some of the things. These are some of the
Mushrooms, death caps.
plants and creatures, insects and birds that you're likely to find in the countryside.
Yeah. Apparently the death cap mushroom stinks to high heaven.
Oh, well, we'll remember that, won't we, when we go in the woods and see some death caps.
Yes, we won't want to eat them.
Oh, it smells very nice. Mango wurzel.
Looks like it's related to the beetroot and the beetle. Correct me if I'm wrong.
Wurzel?
Corncrake.
Yeah, that's a corncrake.
Yeah. They have a distinctive sound as well.
Yes. There it goes. There's a cute little weasel. And some trees. And bats.
Yeah.
There's a pygmy shrew.
Shrews and deers. Bloodsuckers.
And then daddy long legs,
they're-
green flies.
It's about their season now, when they're
Yes.
mature. See them everywhere at this time of year in September.
And all the birds.
All the birds.
All the creatures that have been stuffed, we were told.
They didn't
That's-
kill them, they were just accidents or they died naturally.
Yeah.
The Severn Ham is the land between the Avon and the Severn.
Here you've got two rivers. The Severn and the Avon.
Yeah. Which of course lent its name to the cosmetics company. Grass snake. And a little shrew. There's a polecat.
Oh no.
No, and a weasel.
It's sweet,
Yeah, they're very
cute.
cute. Little faces.
It's always been an area that's flooded around here. Like Burton-on-Trent, that's always flooded as well.
Yeah. We've got hedgehogs in Broadstairs.
Mm.
And people put bowls of water out for them.
Yeah. Cute little duckling.
I know, it's sweet.
It's a shame that it died.
Yeah. Flooded seat there.
And then John Moore said on flooding, come rain, come shine. He recounts the devastating effects of flooding on his fictional town of Elmbury, which was a thinly disguised version of Tewkesbury, which is famous for being inundated over the centuries.
It's being surrounded by floodplains. And here's the 2024 flood.
The River Nith is the same. Dumfries back floods a lot as well.
Yeah. The 2007 flood.
It happens pretty regularly.
Yeah.
Cockermouth is another place that floods as well.
There's people in Gloucestershire without running water for 3 weeks.
Wow. In 1640, in the Giles Geest account book, in the midst of harvest, not one dry day in a fortnight, and we had 8 floods between Midsummer and Michaelmas, for often our ham was under water, and the hay was all lost, and the meadow not half mowed, but let rot upon the ground.
Celandine, cowslip, lady's smock and cuckoo flower. Carpet the ham. Horseradish. We tried growing that, didn't have much luck with that.
No.
You can only get it in a jar.
And that's the great dodder, which is a rare annual plant, a member of the bindweed family. It's a parasitic herb which grows on nettles and hops.
Interesting.
It grows in gardens, roadsides and in streamside thickets. Like fungi, the great dodder doesn't have chlorophyll and is incapable of photosynthesizing. It also lacks ground roots and completely relies on the host plant. When a host is found, dodder starts to twine around its shoot.
Interesting. And there's the fish, got lampreys in the river. Eels. Twig shad. Remember the herring family. It is known as the mayfish, as it returns to the sea to spawn between April and June. There's the Swill Gate. There's another tributary, and there's the Avon.
And there we have it. This is the John Moore Museum, and over there, which we saw earlier, the Merchant's House. So our next stop might have to be the Bell, which is haunted.